There's something incredibly naive in the way the news media covers politics, as though it's primarily about policy positions or personalities, right? Those are the two major ways that the news media covers politics. It was about tax policy or foreign policy or education policy or criminal justice policy. It was about... But that's not realistic. That's not how politics is powered. All right, what drives politics is primarily identity, right? It's not policy positions, it's identity. So the Republican Party can be free market or it can be protectionist, and it's still going to appeal to substantially the same voters. And the Republicans can be pro-immigration or anti-immigration. They're still going to largely appeal to the same voters. Now, the other key thing that drives politics is interests. Right.
I'm Patrick Healy, deputy editor of New York Times Opinion. And I've covered American politics for decades as a reporter, an editor, and running our New York Times focus groups. With the presidential campaign in full swing, I'm looking each week at what matters most in the race between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Okay, so with Donald Trump's criminal trial winding down and closing arguments now expected next week, I have two big takeaways from this trial. It's how durable the enthusiasm and loyalty is of the Trump base for their man, but it's also the dangerous political dynamic that President Biden faces for this year. Many Americans want change in the economy, in immigration, in foreign policy, and while they may respect Joe Biden, they don't want Joe Biden anymore. Even the Trump criminal trial hasn't been enough to make Biden look good by comparison.
Where does this guy get the idea that so many Americans just respect Joe Biden? Just incredibly naive and silly. He thinks that tens of millions of Americans respect Joe Biden. Joe Biden's never been popular. He's been in the U.S. Senate for 40 years. He was Barack Obama's vice president for 8 years. He's been president of the United States now for over 3 years. He's never, ever been popular, right? And he's certainly never, ever been widely respected. He's always been known as a motor mouth, as incredibly immature, right? As an egomaniac, as someone with a vast exaggeration of his own abilities. And this highly experienced New York Times columnist thinks that there are all these dangers for Joe Biden, who he thinks is widely respected by the American public. Absurd. Come on, man.
I think Biden is coming across to voters in ways that make them maybe like him personally. Certainly a lot of them respect him, but he's not coming across in ways that make people want him for another 4 years. That may sound obvious, but that's not a small thing. And the most striking thing that we're seeing about Joe Biden right now is that a lot of moderate and centrist Democrats don't want him for another 4 years. They're willing to look at an RFK Jr. or even a Donald Trump, or think about sitting this out altogether.
And so his incredibly naive prescription is, oh, Joe Biden just needs to come out with more policies. He just needs to do a better job of presenting and he needs to do a better job of coming up with policies. If only Joe Biden had better policies, better communication of his policies, all right? That would drive his campaign forward. But politics in America is not primarily about policies, right? It's primarily about identity. It's not primarily about principles. It's primarily about interests, right? What is considered cool? What you consider cool? What you consider uncool? People don't want to look uncool. People most want to belong to a certain in-group, and whatever your in-group desires is pretty much the way that you are going to go politically.
To get American voters to want to give you another 4 years in the presidency, you have to offer a vision that really persuades them that you're the one to lead them into the future. You saw Bill Clinton do that in 1996 in his re-election race with his idea about building a bridge to the 21st century.
This guy genuinely believes that the reason that Bill Clinton was re-elected in 1996 was because of his profound and moving an erudite and transcendent political platform about moving America into the 21st century. That's not why Bill Clinton was reelected. He was reelected because people felt that he was better than the alternative, Bob Dole, that they were more comfortable identifying with what Bill Clinton was presenting than the alternatives, right? People were voting their interests. Bill Clinton had done a pretty reasonable job with the American economy.
You saw it with George W. Bush in 2004, where he talked about living in a safer world. And you saw it with Barack Obama in 2012. His re-election campaign had a very simple message: forward. I haven't seen that big vision from Joe Biden yet that would.
Damn, if only Joe Biden had the very simple message that Barack Obama came up with, forward. I mean, what a stunning platform, forward. I mean, that's why Barack Obama got 8 years as president of the United States, right? Because he came up with this platform and promoted this stunning platform of forward. Ooh, I'm getting a thrill running up and down my leg when I simply think about the platform of forward.
Really give voters a sense of why they would want to stick with him for another 4 years. He talks about Trump being out for revenge. He talks about Trump being a threat to democracy. He talks about the extremism of the MAGA base. But none of that is convincing enough people about why they should want Joe Biden for president. What is it about Joe Biden's vision for the next 4 years that's saying to young black men, to college students, to Hispanics across America, that he has the right ideas that'll make their lives better over the next 4 years?
So this guy thinks that politics comes down to having the right ideas, that people become convinced, oh, this will make my life better for the next 4 years. All right, this is the way to go. I mean, how silly, how fruity, how ridiculous is this? And yet this is an elite member of the news media.
Look, this is a hard thing that I'm talking about. It's turning respect for Joe Biden into wanting Joe Biden. How do you turn respect into want? I think it's about laying out a vision and a message that's far sharper about the economy. The economy is the issue that unites voters across all the demographic groups and all the key states that Biden needs. It has to do with inflation. It has to do with interest rates. It has to do with understanding the pain that a lot of Americans still feel economically.